Hello guys, today is 27. Today is March 27th, 11:50. Almost lunchtime. Almost lunchtime. Let's continue our Christmas Carol book reading series. At the length at the at length the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. With a new will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat. You all you'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose, said Scrooge. If quite if quite convenient, sir. It's not convenient, said Scrooge, and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. I don't know exactly how to pronounce this sentence. Well, I just asked the a artificial intelligence to read this sentence aloud, and this was not very far from what I was reading. So I will just read again. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used. I'll be bound. The clerk smiled faintly. And yet, said Scrooge, you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wage for no work. The clerk observed it. The clerk observed that it was only once a year, a poor excuse from picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December, said Scrooge, buttoning his greatcoat to the chin. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning. Be here all the earlier next morning. The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling. The office was closed in a twinkling. The clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no great coat, went down a slide on Cornhill, and at the end of a lane of boys, 20 times in honor of its being christened. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no great coat, went down a slide of Cornhill, at the end of a lane of boys, 20 times in honor of its being Christmas Eve, and then ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt, to play at blindman's buff. Scrooge took his me- Scrooge took his melancholy dinner. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled, Scrooge took his melancholy dinner. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers, he beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard, but it had so little business to be. They, they were a gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard, where it had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run there when it was a young house, playing at hide and seek with other houses, and forgotten the way out again. It was old enough now, and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge the other rooms being all let out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew every stone, was fain to grope with his. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. The fog and frost so hung about the black old gateway of the house that it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat in mournful meditation on the threshold. Now it is a fact that there was nothing all now it is a fact that the now it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular now it is a fact that there now it is a fact that there was now it is a fact that there was now it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door. Now it is a fact that there now it is a fact that there now it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Also that Scrooge had as little as also that Scrooge had as little of what is called fancy about him as any man in the city of London, even including, which is a bold word, the corporation, alderman, and livery. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. And then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker without its undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face, it was not an impenetrable. 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 Marley's face, it was not an impenetrable shadow, impenetrable. Marley's face, it was not an impenetrable shadow as the other objects in the yards were, but had a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That, and its livid color, made it horrible, but its horror seemed to be in spite of the face and beyond its control, rather than a part of its own expression. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was Knocker again. To say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation to which he had been a stranger from infancy, would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key he had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in, and lighted his candle. He did pause, with a moment's irresolution, before he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind it first, as if he had, as if he half, as if he half expected, and he did look cautiously behind it first, as if he had, as if he half expected to be terrified with the sight of Marley's pigtail sticking out in the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on. So he said, "Pooh pooh," and he closed it with a bang. I'm gonna stop it. The sound resounded through the house like a thunder, Every room above and every cask in the wine merchant's cellar. Every room above and every cask in the wine Every room above and every cask in the wine merchant's cellars below appeared to have a separate peal of echoes of its own. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too, trimming his candle as he went. Okay, now we're gonna stop here and we're gonna see you the next time, in the next episode of A Christmas Carol reading book series.